Hello, and welcome to our discussion on paraphrasing. We've been working on integrating sources for the last weeks, and I have a really helpful document in this week's folder. It's called Integrating Sources. What I like about it is it does a good job of explaining three different strategies that you can employ for using source materials, and it gives some tips on which which type of integration is best for a given kind of information. So our options are direct quotations, paraphrase, and summary. We've been doing quite a bit with summary and direct quotations, and now it's time to talk about paraphrase. You use paraphrase to explain is probably the best way to think about them. Integrating sources explains that a paraphrase can be useful because putting source material in your own words shows readers that you have a true understanding of that material. Also, to restate it in your own words, the full meaning of the phrase or passage helps readers understand difficult, complex, jargon riddled, or ambiguous passages. Such passages, if quoted, will still require extensive explanation in order to be understood. I think it's really useful to think of paraphrase as translation. So it's when you have one or two sentences that instead of directly quoting, you're going to put in your own words because they have, they're confusing. Maybe they refer to something that's in a very different part of the essay. Maybe they have vocabulary that you're going to have to spend time explaining to your reader anyway. So instead of giving a confusing or poorly written direct quotation, you can use paraphrase to translate it. Here is the tricky part. Paraphrasing needs to be a complete translation of that short passage. So sometimes I'll hear students tell me that they were told, well, you just need to translate 65 or 75% of the passage. And that's kind of true, but also very much not true because it really depends on which words you're translating. Um, right? Because it's all the key and distinctive words that need to be translated into your own. For instance, you wouldn't need to translate and, the, a, to, but words like immobilize, territorial, or synchronous are really distinctive vocabulary that you're going to have to translate. So, although it's true that typically you can look at a paraphrase and say that about 75% maybe has been translated, it really depends on which words. The other thing that I find is often left out of a paraphrase is you need to indicate the source since the idea came from someone else. And we've been practicing this with summaries anyway, right, as part of our introducing the source as we give that summary information. It's also true of a paraphrase. You treat it in some ways just a lot more like a direct quotation when you're going to be needing to identify the source either in the signal information, the tag, or in the parentheses at the end. So here's how to paraphrase. This is one way. You want to read and reread the source material until you feel you understand it completely. You take notes on the ideas and the subpoints that you want to take out of that passage in your own words. Then, without looking at the source, write your paraphrase. Do not have do not have the source up on a screen or the book open and let your eyes wander over there because it will pull you to those key distinctive words that you really want to make sure that you've translated. So after you have written your paraphrase, then you have to go back and double check. You have to do like a word by word check to make sure that you haven't used any of the key or distinctive vocabulary from the source. And then you need to indicate that the ideas in the paraphrase have come from the source, originally, that they're not your idea. So here's an example. So this is from a short piece on designing flags. And what I have here is the direct quote, and then I have a correct paraphrase. So you can see that what stays the same is I have the full name of the author, Ted Kaye. I have the name of the piece, Good Flag, Bad Flag. And I even have used the same transitional phrase, designers should consider that, right? So that's the same between the direct quote and the paraphrase. And then what I've done is translated the direct quote of usually a single primary symbol is best. Avoid those that are less likely to be representative or unique. So I've translated that. It's laborious, so because you can see my translation, right? It's the effective strategy of using one main emblematic item while making sure that it correctly connotes what it's representing in a way that doesn't look too much like one being used elsewhere. So I tried to, uh, you know, take my understanding of what that quote means because I understand the larger context because I've read the article, and I'm embedding some of that explanatory information in my paraphrase. But you can see, like, it's not easy. It often takes more words to do a paraphrase than the quote itself. One thing that I like to suggest is that you do a Google test. So when you're completely done with your paraphrase, one thing that you can do is copy your paraphrase, including the last name of the author, into a Google search. And when you hit enter, if the Google search takes you to the section of the article that you quoted, it is not paraphrased correctly in your own words. So that's not going to be a complete test, but it's one way. In the integrating sources document, they have some exercises where you can practice trying to figure out if something is a summary, if it's a paraphrase, or if it's plagiarism. So what they do is they give you a quote from this college, from the Empire State College's student handbook, and um, then they give you sample A, B, or C. So one of them is a summary, one of them is a correct paraphrase, and one of them is a paraphrase with plagiarism. So go ahead and hit pause, take a second, and look at A, B, or C and identify which one it is. This is a really important part of the process for you to try to start your brain to start to figure out which is which. So hit pause and do that before you keep going. All right, welcome back. Here are your answers. So the first one, A, is a summary. And just like you've seen as you've been doing your source summaries, a summary is often shorter. B is correctly paraphrased, and that's because all the keywords and vocabulary have been translated. It also has, right, our source number at the end, our page number. C is the one with plagiarism, and we're going to look at it for a second and figure out why that is. Here's my example of one way to fix the plagiarized sample C. I don't even think it's as good as their correctly paraphrased one, but it's one way. So one thing I did is I took the phrase "maybe withdrawn from the college" and I reworded that into "expelled," which isn't exactly the same, but I think it's in the spirit of the idea. Then I added quotation marks around the phrase, which is the worst part of the plagiarism of this passage, the phrase plagiarism, forgery, misrepresentation. So my hint is that if you get stuck and you can't find new words to explain part of what you're paraphrasing, you can add quotation marks around that. I think one way to think about source integration of direct quotations is it is a combination of paraphrasing and directly quoting. And taking out a little snippet like this to use as a direct quotation is an excellent skill. I've also added the page number of the source to fully fix the sample C. So that's paraphrasing, the good and the bad. The good, paraphrasing is an excellent way to clarify a confusing or complex source idea and to show the reader you really understand the source idea. The bad is that paraphrasing is tricky. It takes patience and attention to detail to translate everything into your own words. It takes a long time, which is part of what makes it cool when when as instructors, when we see that in your paper, we're like, ooh, it takes some skills. But remember the two major mistakes that we see all the time. It's leaving in key or distinctive vocabulary that should be in quotation marks, right? That's plagiarism. It's going to get you in trouble. Also, we see forgetting to give credit to the source. You can do that just like you would with a direct quote, either in the introduction information leading up to the paraphrase or in parentheses at the end. So I hope you found this helpful and good luck with your paraphrasing.